Welcome to the ScreenCrush Break Room. I'm Ryan Arey, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in The Bad Batch, Episode 3.
The episode is titled The Replacements, and this has a few different meanings. Most obviously, it's referring to human troops replacing the Bad Batch, reflecting how clone troops are all about to be replaced by regular conscripts.
Explore new worlds, learn valuable skills, bring order and unity to the galaxy.
And it refers to replacement parts that they need to repair the ship. But also it refers to Omega replacing Crosshair as a member of the squad.
That's Crosshair's weapon kit.
The squad still feels the loss of Crosshair like he's a phantom limb. For instance, Omega is sleeping on a gonk droid when Crosshair's bunk is presumably empty. This is because the team can't bear the idea that he's gone. And also the Kaminoans give the title replacements a little twist that I'll go over later in the video. Tech is focusing on testing the effects of the inhibitor chips, which really should be their #1 priority. Remember, each clone has a chip in their brain that takes over their command functions when activated, and this is why they all obeyed Order 66 so blindly.
Stay back!
In fact, I think they'll eventually run into Clone Trooper Rex, who, as we saw in the Clone Wars series, was able to deactivate his chip in the show's final episodes. And then Rex will be like, oh yeah, it's a chip, you just cut it out here, I'll show you.
Wolf, Gregor and I all removed our control chips.
Remember, in Episode 1, the chip mildly affected Crosshair.
Good soldiers follow orders.
So the Kaminoans were able to reactivate it. Now there's no reason to think they couldn't reactivate the chips in all of them, or that the chips will eventually activate on their own, like a motor that suddenly turns over. It seems like this could be the case with Wrecker, whose head is hurting in the exact same spot where the chip is implanted.
I must have hit my head in a crash.
The Bad Batch are in a race against time and their own physiology, and they don't even know it. The Batch fell out of hyperspace because of a bad power capacitor.
The power capacitor's blown.
Although in reality, all capacitors store power, so this is kind of like saying an ATM machine. In Star Wars and real life, capacitors are long tubes that store energy. In Rogue One, Galen Erso was trying to create large capacitors that could be used on remote worlds to provide power for their populations. Until the Empire, made him use this power storage technology to harness the energy of kyber crystals into a planet murder ray. It is very lucky that they happen to drop out of hyperspace in orbit around a planet and not, say...
Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then it injured trip real quick, wouldn't it?
It's almost like the Force is with them.
That's not how the Force works.
Well, it is if Omega's a Force-sensitive clone, like I predicted.
It's your own room.
I like that The Bad Batch has become a show about parenting. It gives some real human stakes to this mercenary team. But now that Hunter and the others have a kid to look after, they should really think about getting some life insurance. After all, because of the clone's accelerated aging, they're going to be old like any day now. And that goes for you too. If you have a family who rely on your income, then you need life insurance. You never know when something might happen, like you're working your government job in a space station and some hotshot kid blows it up. I know life insurance seems weird and complicated, but that's why I recommend Policy Genius, the sponsor of this week's video. It's very easy to use. You head over to policygenius.com to get started. In just a few minutes, you can work out how much coverage you need and compare personalized quotes to get your best price. Policy Genius is not an insurance company. It's their job to work with the different insurance companies to find the best rates for you. They handle all the paperwork and applications for free. Remember what Jack Napier said.
Think about the future.
Don't put this off till you're older because life insurance is way cheaper when you're still young. Get a good rate now and lock it in for decades. You could save 50% or more on life insurance by comparing quotes with Policy Genius. And you can save $1,300 or more every year by using Policy Genius to compare life insurance policies. So don't put it off. Click the link in the description to get your policy started today. Back to the Easter eggs.
May I present our first elite squad.
Then we go back to Kamino, the birthplace of the clones that we first saw in Attack of the Clones. The medical droid working on Crosshair is named AZI-345-211-896-246-498-721-347, but he's just called AZI-3 for short. We first saw him in the Clone Conspiracy arc in the Clone Wars series, where we first learned about the inhibitor chip.
Nothing.
What?
The sample doesn't match anything found in the Jango Fett genotype.
Notice that his head is adorned with the Kaminoan symbol that we've seen in Attack of the Clones and The Mandalorian. And this medical droid is a GH-7 model that we first saw in Revenge of the Sith.
She has lost the will to live.
The droid says,
I am compelled to comply with your request.
which I thought was an interesting touch. The show, at its core, is about free will versus programming. Crosshair is compelled to follow orders, almost like he's a droid.
Good soldiers follow orders.
Whereas the Bad Batch decide for themselves, like human beings.
The clones once helped us free Onderon, so we'll give them a choice.
We see the same battle between the new human troops and Crosshair later on.
Forget our orders. This is wrong.
Tarkin is still on the planet, debating whether or not to cut costs and abandon the clone army in favor of human troopers, because clones are expensive and he needs to cut costs to build the Empire's giant murder ray. He's working with Admiral Rampart, who appeared as a hologram in the last episode. Rampart is supervising the creation of chain codes, the space social security numbers that were the focus of last week's episode. Speaking of chain codes, notice that now Tarkin and Rampart are carrying Imperial code cylinders. These were a major part of The Mandalorian Chapter 15. Tarkin, by the way, has received a promotion from Republic Navy Admiral to Imperial Governor. It's another way of showing the slow transition between the Republic and the Empire. Rampart is supervising Project War Mantle, so named because it's about transferring the mantle of the military from the clones over to humans. But that project, War Mantle, has been seen in Star Wars before. It's one of the many projects that Jyn Erso skims through when she's on Scarif, searching for the Death Star plans.
War Mantle, Cluster Prism.
The Kaminoans with speaking roles are Lama Su, who helped cover up the existence of clone troops in the Clone Conspiracy arc.
Give me that. You can't be trusted.
And Governor Nala Se, who has appeared in many Clone Wars episodes. Notice that Crosshair's uniform still bears the symbol of the Republic and not the Empire. In the last episode, we saw that the Republic's galactic roundel was already being replaced with the Imperial crest. Notice that in addition to removing 2 of the spikes, there's an inversion of color, showing that the Empire has the darkness of the Sith at its core. The new troopers are credited with the designation ESO-1 and ESO-3, as opposed to Stormtrooper designations which are called TK numbers. I'm guessing that ES stands for Empire Soldier. Now, one of these troops, the one who doesn't speak, looks a lot like Commander Elia Zara from the most recent run of Star Wars comics. She was a disciple of Tarkin who murdered her fellow Imperial officers for the right to train directly under him. She's also a main adversary in the current comics. Now, she doesn't say anything in this episode, but I don't think it's a coincidence that these 2 characters, who both serve under Tarkin, appeared within the canon a year within of each other. The whole sequence of the monster and the ship on the planet seems like an echo, get it, of The Empire Strikes Back. You'll remember that in Empire, the heroes were outside the ship in a foggy environment wearing breathing masks, but they were hindered by creatures who were feeding on their power supply.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
When the Bad Batch communicate, they use Republic comlinks, just like Qui-Gon Jinn used in The Phantom Menace. I know I've pointed this out before, but I love that they're modeled after a woman's razor. And of course, the comlink sound is modified from Revenge of the Sith. One of my favorite things about the show is how it shows the little ways that the Empire gains power. Like Padme says,
"So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause."
And we're seeing that play out in small increments on the show. Fascists like Hitler were able to take power largely because they provided stability. In Hitler's case, Germany's Weimar government was suffering under the Depression, rampant inflation, and reparations paid to the winners of World War I. And we see here that galactic citizens are attracted to the same stability.
With the Empire, I get paid, I get fed, and I have a roof over my head. That's more than the Republic ever did for me.
Rampart says,
"The loyalty of those who willingly enlist is what I see tremendous value in."
And this is getting at the heart of the Empire. Evil organizations can only be allowed to exist if people allow them to exist. This goes for all evil institutions, be they the Galactic Empire or Taco Bell. Tarkin orders the new squad back to Onderon. We first saw this planet in Revenge of the Sith, and it was the location of a long arc in the Clone Wars that also introduced Saw Gurerra, who of course was played by Forrest Whitaker in Rogue One. Saw Gurerra's tactics were always too extreme for the rest of the rebellion.
But Saw Gurerra is an extremist.
And in this episode, we see why.
We were promised transport off-world, that's all.
Later.
After the Empire slaughters innocent people who were under his protection, he didn't see the point in playing nice any longer.
I know some people in this rebellion don't want to admit it, but we are in a war, and war is loss.
Among these innocents are the species Agatl and a Twi'lek. The symbol on the soldiers' helmets is the sigil of the Onderon Rebels, the group that Saw led back in the Clone Wars. And one of these troopers is a proto-flame trooper, like we first saw in Jedi Fallen Order.
Anybody order fried sauerkraut?
Also, did you notice the human troopers use red blaster bolts while the clones use blue? Another subtle indication that the Empire is under the control of the Sith. Now this storyline is harsh.
I don't know. But I wouldn't tell you if I did.
And of course later, they'll probably justify their actions by saying they were only following orders. Remember, in the first episode, the Bad Batch were sent to Onderon and chose to not harm any of these refugees. The idea here being that the Bad Batch, a group of programmable copies of a human being, were able to display more humanity than the actual humans. The Bad Batch show isn't just showing us that clones can be evil, it's saying that anyone can be evil, and that true evil lies in our choices. This is symbolized by Crosshair's line,
"Good soldiers follow orders,"
which is also what the clone trooper Tup said after his chip malfunctioned and he killed a Jedi just a little too early.
"Good soldiers follow orders."
Now back to the clones behaving more like human beings, Omega places herself in danger for the good of others. She chooses to enter the cave. Entrance of the cave, or the belly of the beast, is an important step in Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. It's when the hero fully steps outside of their comfort zone and are surrounded by total peril. Luke does this 3 times, the garbage compactor, Dagobah, and the Rancor pit. He also fails 3 times, but we can talk about that later. We also saw this for Anakin in the original Clone Wars cartoon series, and from Rey in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, and from Din Djarin in The Mandalorian. I mean, heck, this trope goes all the way back to Odysseus fighting the Cyclops in the Odyssey. Actually, the trope of fighting the monster in the cave goes all the way back to prehistoric man fighting saber-toothed tigers so they could take their cave and adorn it with nice artwork. And actually, if you take a look around the cave, this piece of machinery would look familiar to you. This is actually a lightsaber that was owned by a Jedi we've seen several times in the Clone Wars, your mom. Now, while Omega is in the cave, she seems to relate to and communicate with this animal. This is another hint that she could be Force-sensitive. Ezra from Star Wars Rebels frequently used the Force to communicate with animals, and we see Rey pulling the same trick in Rise of Skywalker. This creature is called an Ordo Moondragon. There was also a Mandalorian named Canderous Ordo in the KOTOR video games.
No relation.
Back on the ship, Wrecker has made Omega her own room where she can see the stars. But most importantly, he gave her his stuffed Gundark. But more importantly, he gives her his stuffed Lothcat.
"You found my Lula!"
Nala Se and Lama Su sprinkle some breadcrumbs to lead us toward the show's ongoing mystery. They talk about the Jango Fett DNA degrading, kind of like Michael Keaton's DNA in Multiplicity.
And now sometimes you make a copy of a copy, it's not quite as sharp as, well, the original.
She touched my peppy, Steve.
They mention that they need the direct source for their new project, and that the Bad Batch won't return willingly.
They are Kaminoan property, and we only need one.
Now this is interesting, because if they needed to splice from the Bad Batch's DNA, and they only need one, well then they already have Crosshair. So this makes me think that they don't need the Bad Batch DNA, they specifically need Omega. In the first episode, they implied that they were keeping Omega a secret from the Empire.
Until the Empire's intentions are made clear, say nothing.
So let's think about this. Maybe Omega wasn't a commission from Palpatine. What if, on their own, the Kaminoans decided to make an army of their own Jedi that they could then market to the Republic? This would be the ultimate soldier, the reason they called her Omega. She's the final result of this project. Then they could upsell the Republic, and well now the Empire, into buying an even better soldier that would replace the need for the Jedi. But there's also a flaw in that plan. Clones cannot be Force sensitive because they don't have midichlorians.
Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force.
It's the whole reason Palpatine had trouble making himself a new body, and why Moff Gideon wanted Grogu's blood, and why Palpatine needs Rey. She was the daughter of an offshoot Palpatine clone and a human, meaning that she has his DNA along with human midichlorians. So if that's the case, then who is Omega's DNA spliced with? The Kaminoans could have stolen some Jedi DNA. Now, a number of Jedi have visited Kamino for training, including Shaak Ti. I think it would be cool if she was a clone of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which in a weird way would make her Boba Fett's sister and Obi-Wan Kenobi's daughter. Maybe when Obi-Wan Kenobi visited Kamino in Attack of the Clones, they were like, oh hey, just gotta do a quick COVID test, and they swabbed some of his DNA on a Q-tip. I kind of like this theory, because it means that Obi-Wan Kenobi could live on in the Star Wars universe, and that maybe Omega would find a way to appear in the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series. Or hell, she might just be another Skywalker.
My name's Omega Skywalker.
Well, that's all the Easter eggs that we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.